In the USA, as in many other countries, it is easy to notice that the main TV stations are divided according to political views. Undoubtedly, this division causes a lot of inaccuracies. The stations are outdoing each other in bending the facts to suit their political preferences. The fact that television manipulates us is not surprising, but what is worth discussing is the process of manipulation itself, especially when we realize that the used techniques originated from psychology and sociology. In the times of the universality of mass media, no one can escape the attempts of mass persuasion. Every time we turn on the radio or TV or we see ads on Facebook, someone is trying to convince us to buy this particular product, vote for this particular candidate, or to support a particular idea. This is most noticeable in advertisements. The producers of almost identical product, like different kinds of vitamin C, toothpaste or washing powders, spend a huge amount of money to convince us to choose a product of their brand. The situation is no different in case of politicians representing different political groupings but postulating similar solutions. In both cases, people willing to sell their product try to play on our emotions and unconscious reactions. However, it is much more dangerous in a democracy in which the rational public debate is the only way to have a beneficial impact on important decisions like war declaration. Strong emotions such as those present in the information media frequently make us unable to make decisions rationally. Hermann Göring, before he was sentenced to death in Nuremberg, said, "The people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them that they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country." However, it doesn't have to be engaged in important issues straight away. Manipulative attempts can be noticed even in ordinary things, such as ads for kids. A child watching cartoons on Saturday morning is flooded by a huge amount of short commercials of cereal, snacks and sweets just to make them ask their parents to buy them products seen on TV. And it seems that commercials do their job. As stated by mothers in one of the studies, over 90% of kids in preschool age ask for toys or food which they saw on TV. What is more, almost 2/3 of mothers claim that they have heard their 3-year-old children singing songs which they learned from TV ads. As we age, we become more skeptical about ads, and the older the child is, the more it is aware of the fact that ads are often untruthful. Also, better educated people are skeptical about media content. Unfortunately, they at the same time claim that their skepticism makes them resilient to manipulations. But the fact that someone considers himself resilient to persuasion does not mean real resilience. And the researches show that we are influenced by television advertising programs even if we are aware of their bias. In the case of many consumables, people are willing to buy products of a specific brand just because they are strongly advertised and therefore familiar. When we are dealing with identical products, what is crucial is mere familiarity of the product, for example from TV. Many examples show that the sudden increase in the number of products presented in TV results in a big change in knowledge of them, which often affects their sale. It can be seen in the example of A&W root beer, which increased its market share from 15% to 50% after 6 months of the TV advertising campaign. Is voting for a presidential candidate a decision of the same kind? The answer is probably yes. As early as in the 1970s, studies have shown that those Congress candidates who spent the most money generally received the most votes. However, it was shown recently that short television films promoting the candidates are definitely the most effective way of influencing people's votes. What is more, such films are especially effective when the campaign is concentrated on the issues that arouse voters' emotions. For example, during the presidential election in 1988, George Bush Sr. was far behind Michael Dukakis in the early polls. In a few months, however, all this advantage disappeared and Bush won easily on the election day. Many analysts assign this to sudden change to the case of Willie Horton, or precisely both candidates' reaction to it. Willie Horton was a prisoner who was temporarily released as a beneficiary of a Massachusetts weekend furlough program. During this leave, Horton escaped to Maryland where he raped a woman. Michael Dukakis was the governor of Massachusetts when Horton was released. Claiming that Dukakis is too lenient towards criminals, Bush placed many announcements in TV and newspapers that presented a picture of grim-looking Horton and criminals entering and exiting prison through a revolving door. Those announcements struck a sensitive point of many Americans who were worried about crimes on the streets. They suspected that the justice system favors criminals at the expense of victims. The fact that Horton was black and his victim was white did not escape the attention of the audience. And how did Dukakis counteract? Using facts and numbers. He showed that Massachusetts was one of many states which realized the furlough program. Even the federal administration, of which Bush was a member, did so. Also, Dukakis pointed out the fact that leave programs were mostly successful. He explained that this program was meant to help prisoners at the end of their prison term to adapt to life outside prison and assured that the whole situation was blown out of proportion. George Bush, if he had been elected, he would not have had any intention of changing the system of granting parole. However, such a depiction of this case is nothing but boring, and when people are frightened and angry, facts and numbers are not convincing. They can have a positive effect when they refer to problems interesting for voters. In the majority of situations, what drives our attention the most are irrelevant signals and guidelines which suggest fairness, unfairness, or appeal of the argument. A great example of such action could be observed during the O.J. Simpson process when the prosecutor asked him to put on blood-stained gloves used by the murderer. They were too small for Simpson. The concealer made a summary consisting of some really convincing arguments and something more. He repeated several times, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," to the jury. This utterance was convincing not because of logic. It is possible to murder somebody in small gloves. When people judge the argument, they are highly influenced by its way of formulation. In that case, it was the rhyme that made it sound like the truth. Also, studies confirm our susceptibility to this tactic. People are more likely to be convinced by rhyming aphorisms rather than those without rhymes. For years, the art of choosing the right words, not necessarily rhyming ones, is the essential tool of every election campaign. Electoral mottos, names of programs, and it simply works. One more thing is worth mentioning. In case of TV and other platforms whose goal is to gain the audience, their influence on the viewer and manipulating with his views doesn't have to be conscious and planned. It is a good representation of a phenomenon called emotional contagion. For example, in October 1982 in Chicago, 7 people died after taking headache pills laced with cyanide. This tragedy was spread widely by mass media through the United States. For a couple of days, you couldn't watch TV, listen to the radio, or read a newspaper without noticing information about poisoned medicine. Of course, this situation was at the same time tragic and strange, which made it great journalistic material. However, the results of this publicity were immediate. Copycat crimes have been reported in cities all over the country: poisoned mouthwash, eye drops, nose spray, soda water, or even hot dogs. Those actions, dramatically named imitative poisoning, also received much attention in the media. The reaction of the society had all the characteristics of an escalation spiral. Many people panicked, reporting to doctors with alleged burns and poisonings, which were in fact regular sore throats and stomach aches. The number of false alarms was 7 times higher than the actual poisoning cases. Because the incident happened before Halloween, due to the probability of poisoning candies for children, authorities in many cities prohibited their distribution. Interestingly, after some time, the same TV stations and newspapers that first made the poisoning accidents a sensation published critical comments from media professionals who pointed to the disastrous consequences of such publicity. Keeping this in mind, it is important to notice that because of living in the world with easy access to media, we are not only more liable to manipulations, but also we have unusual tools to deal with them. For example, we can point out the breaking of promises and self-denial to politicians. Nothing is lost on the internet. In 2006, when the US Secretary of State stated that no one ever claimed that war in Iraq would be easy, within the next few hours thousands of citizens used their computers and found out that 4 years earlier the Secretary ensured that the war would be over in the following few months. Additionally, with all that tragic news coming from TV, we have to remember that the amount of violence and crimes on TV is a lot smaller than in real life. Approximately half of the TV figures take part in some kind of violent confrontation every week, while programs are focused mostly on tragedies and bad news. Meanwhile, when we look closely at the facts, less than 1% of Americans were victims of violent crime in 2019, which can be considered more than optimistic.
We appreciate you guys spending time with us here, so please go ahead and watch our other videos. Oh, and ring that notification bell so you're the first one to get the new ones.